Welcome, welcome, come on in. The show's about to begin. Grab your seat and feel the nostalgia grow. Sit tight, relax, and enjoy the ride. We're so glad you're here. Let's go. It's time for Let's Play with AppleMatt.
Hombres, senoritas, right this way to visit the Cantina. And just click anywhere if you want to skip my little cross-cultural introduction. Mexicans in the Old West found themselves in a unique position. They lived their whole lives in the same place, maybe even the same place their parents or grandparents had lived, yet they were now foreigners. This was because after getting whooped by the U.S. in the Mexican War of the 1840s, old Mexico was forced to sell the gringos almost half its territory. For no more than $15 million, America got the states of Texas, Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and California. They don't roll land deals like that no more. Now, Wyatt Earp's town of Tombstone was in southern Arizona. The last jigsaw piece plugged into the old continental U.S. of A. way back in 1853. The town was close enough to the Mexican border that you could pay your bills in pesos. Still, Arizona's Mexican residents weren't exactly made to feel at home. Swindled out of much of their land and excluded from skilled trades, they were forced into poor-paying jobs like chopping wood, making charcoal, and other manual labor. Since there weren't no red carpet inviting them into the Anglos' watering holes, the town's Mexican folks are hanging out in places like this. And at this cantina, amigo, everybody's welcome. At this table, you might have found Wyatt Earp's arch enemies, the Clamptons and the McLaurys, looking for information. Their interest in Mexico wasn't cultural, it was cattle rustling. As the story goes, they used to steal a couple thousand cattle at a time down in Sonora. Then they'd bring them back up across the border and sell them for $3 or $4 a head. By the way, the bird painted on the back of the chair is a roadrunner. The little fellows were said to race stagecoaches and keep up with them at 15 miles an hour. On each of their little feet, 2 toes point forward and 2 backward. So, if you find their trail, what you see is a string of X marks. They give you no idea which way the bird went. At this here bar, folks told stories of legendary Mexican banditos. They were masked men on fast horses who robbed and harassed wealthy Anglo landowners and miners. The most famous of these desperados was Joaquin Murrieta, who was known throughout much of the Southwest, even though he never really existed. He was actually a blend of several real-life, small-time bandits who really did rob ranchers and miners. This was for revenge after native Mexicans were thrown off their lands and out of mines. Actually, this legend was even better than reality, because when some Mexican-American really did get away with a little revenge robbery, his compadres would just say, "Must have been Joaquin who did it." This piano might have provided the accompaniment for the folk ballads that were sung here. These songs told about the lives and deaths of celebrated vaqueros and sung the praises of the legendary guerrilla fighters who resisted the Anglo takeover of the Southwest. The ballads were called corridos, and you can still hear them sung today. During Wyatt Earp's later years, one vaquero you might have heard immortalized in a song was Juan Laibas. He won a silver trophy at the West's first organized rodeo in Prescott, Arizona in 1888. This roof was made of brush, mud plaster, and earth, and was supported by beams made out of pine logs. The whole thing kept the sun out just fine, but wouldn't hold up against rain very well. It was kind of a desert thing.
Glad you stopped by. You know, being a ghost does get lonely, especially in a ghost town. Perhaps you'd set a spell with me? Nah, you probably want to keep poking around the cantina. Go ahead. We'll meet again.
At this table, you might have found Wyatt Earp's art. At this here bar, folks told stories of... At this here bar, folks... When an adobe fireplace like this was placed along the middle of a wall, folks would commonly build a small partition beside it to create a kind of artificial corner. It was called a paredsita, which meant little wall. It shielded the fireplace from drafts. I'll give you a new silver dollar if you can tell me the right answer to my question.
In mining towns of the Old West, the assay office was a place you could combine a desk job with excitement. This was the first place that the prospectors would take their diggings to find out what, if anything, it was worth. The assayer would weigh the sample, mill it down to separate out any gold or silver, and then weigh the precious metals that emerged. In gold mining country, the assayer might also serve as a kind of a banker and mint, buying gold dust and melting it down into bullion. An assayer was in the thick of everything that happened in town. Hot tips and enticing rumors began right here at the assay office. And as you might imagine, a lot of shenanigans went on here as well. You see, an unscrupulous assayer was an unscrupulous prospector's best friend. For a suitable bribe, he would report that your worthless rock was laced with gold. But even honest assayers could be hoodooed by wily prospectors who brought in highly unrepresentative samples of what they were digging up. And that common trick was known as salting a mine. So, be sure to click around here to find out about the tools of the assayer's trade.
The Western mining fever disease began in 1848 when gold nuggets, like these, were discovered in California. After the 49ers exhausted them claims, they headed on east to Nevada and Colorado, chasing rumors of new finds. By about 1880, it was silver ore that brought Wyatt Earp and a few thousand other honchos to try their luck in the Arizona territory. You'd expect to find a scale like this in an assay office, but in a western gold mining town, you might have also found scales in a lot of unexpected places. You see, folks didn't use paper money, and they didn't even wait for coins to be minted. They just paid for their purchases in raw gold. So, the merchants, bartenders, and even the sporting ladies would keep a balance handy so they could weigh out their customers' payments. Small change, up to $1 or so, would be just a pinch of gold dust. No weighing required, just what fit between your thumb and your index finger. You'd expect to find a scale like this in an assay office.
An old-timer like me needs a map just to find his way around town. But an assayer, at the top of his game, could take one look at a piece of ore, and he could tell you what mine it came from. He might even tell you what part of the mine.
Once the assayer got done cooking down your sample, he'd issue you a certificate saying how much gold or silver he'd found per unit of ore. To make sure that everything stayed on the up and up, he'd make a note of that certificate in a ledger like this. Once the assayer got done cooking, an assayer, like a full-scale mining mill, used chemicals to extract gold and silver from the surrounding ore. But if you ran into a new kind of ore, you often had to do some trial and error to figure out what kind of chemicals to use. You might run through everything from alum to zinc before you found out what worked. Some of the most useful techniques, as it turned out, needed stuff like cyanide, chlorine gas, and mercury, all of them highly toxic. So, Western mining wasn't exactly what you modern-day buckaroos would call eco-friendly. Stranger, answer my question right, and I'll give you a new silver dollar.
If you think the slot machine over at the saloon is a game of chance, you probably haven't been treated by a frontier doctor yet. Small towns wouldn't even have a doctor, so the barber would moonlight as the next best thing. And even in your larger towns, you never quite knew who was hanging out their shingle. Since medical licensing standards were slow to arrive in the West, many of the self-proclaimed doctors were failures from back east, or quacks. There were good doctors, though. Many of them trained by the military. The Earp brothers frequently patronized a Dr. George Goodfellow, who, thanks to the constant flow of violence, became one of the nation's leading authorities on, you guessed it, gunshot wounds. Did you want to see a doctor about that little pain in your side? You probably won't have to take out more than a couple of your internal organs to make you feel better. So look around.
Doctors haven't always been as clean and tidy as they are today. Nobody wore surgical masks or gloves, although the more meticulous ones did roll up their sleeves and maybe even wash their hands in a basin like this. Before someone discovered germs in the late 1800s, doctors thought diseases came from early morning mists or dew or night air. Medical instruments got washed in regular water. That's untreated water. Turned out many people got sicker because the good old doctor's hands were dirty. Would you call dentistry intimate work? Not exactly my notion, but that's what people called it, just to keep women out of the dentistry. In the 1800s, women took a lot of guff for getting into careers that were traditionally for men only. But that didn't stop Dr. Marion Webb, who hung her own shingle in Tombstone in 1880, and may well have used this here chair. Breathing smoky air, some of it from oil lamps, was one reason many pioneers were so sickly. They didn't have much choice, though, since there was no electricity in most small towns, and folks had to use oil lamps like this one. Even though the electric light bulb was invented in 1879, it first appeared in just the big cities. It took a while longer to spread to the small towns dotting the Old West. Even though a number of medical schools were doing business by 1900, many an Old West doctor trained in the old-fashioned way, by doing apprenticeships. They'd mix prescriptions in the local drugstore, or they'd shadow another doc until they felt, well, ready. But not old Doc Holliday. He got his dentistry degree in 1872 at Pennsylvania College of Dental Surgery. At least he had a real education. Doctors were always competing with patent medicine salesmen and home remedies, so some of them took to making and selling their own prescriptions. Every doctor kept a supply of drugs in bottles and jars in their office. These remedies sometimes made them more money than their medical practice. Only the big city doctors got rich from practicing medicine. In the Old West, doctors usually got paid in some kind of barter. Sometimes it was a bushel of corn, a jug of cider, or a pound of butter. Looking at these bottles makes me mindful of a story about Tombstone's Dr. Goodfellow. You see, sometimes he got called in to do coroner work. Must have been a bit dreary, but the good doctor never lost his sense of humor. After examining one gunfight loser, he declared that the corpse was rich in lead, but too badly punctured to hold whiskey. Even women who usually avoided doctors might climb up on one of these birthing tables when it came time to deliver a baby. You see, childbirth fever took a lot of women's lives, including, some folks say, Wyatt's first wife, Urilla. Most times, women on the frontier would call for a doctor, but by the time one would arrive, the child had already been born. Gray's Anatomy was one of the earliest medical books. Out in those fancy medical schools back east, Gray's was required reading, and every school doctor understood anatomy. The book caught on so well that they still use it today. Other books came out in the mid-1800s that were real milestones, like Introduction to Experimental Medicine and Cellular Pathology, and Charles Darwin's Origin of Species. Darwin book still stirs up a lot of folks, don't it? The doctors out west sold the same sorts of concoctions that were peddled on the traveling medicine wagons. People found relief with remedies called childhood, worm destroyer, female remedy, just to name a few. Now, most of the preparations relied on lots of alcohol to work their magic. Chances are these remedies didn't really cure any illnesses. They just made people feel better.
One of my fellow ghosts, the late Dr. Lewis Thomas, wrote a book about how medicine improved so much during the decades of old Wyatt's life. Surprisingly, the main reason wasn't the introduction of new healing techniques. It was doing away with the old practices that had done more harm than good. Around this here doctor's office, you've probably seen some examples of both.
The doctors out west sold the same. Nineteenth century cure-alls were part chemistry and part folk remedy. Tartar emetic for vomiting, quinine for ag, boiled sulfur or powdered brimstone for diphtheria. Now, that was scientific. But for toothache, well, everyone knew that carrying a pig's tooth in your pocket would take care of that. I'll reward you a silver dollar if you can answer this question right.